Hey guys, in the previous few videos, what we saw that when we were running our tests in parallel, all our tests were running with a configuration strategy dynamic. And what it meant was, if you were running all your tests in parallel within a class or across classes, um, the number of threads that were created were based on uh, the course or the processes that you have on your machine. But I can think of some use cases where you would like to limit the number of threads when you're running a test in parallel. Two such cases that come to my mind is, for example, let's say you're trying to run your test on two real devices. And if you're trying to run your test on just two real devices, and if let's say you have 4 or 8 or 10 test cases, that would not work because you would not be able to fetch a unique device for each test case. That's one use case. The second use case is, let's say if you're running your test in CI on a shared server. If you run in a dynamic mode, and maybe you have a CPU, maybe your shared server has a huge CPU, but also maybe there are uh, other projects that are running their test there. If you keep this strategy dynamic, you will basically consume all the resources from that machine, and the other projects will not be able to run their test. What you would want is keep your threads to let's say a decent number, so that not only you can run your test in parallel, but also the other project should not get impacted. So keeping those two use cases in mind, uh, well, we would like to have some sort of control on how many tests we run in parallel. And the way you can do it is by commenting the dynamic strategy, and let's say uncommenting fixed strategy, where you can define the number of threads. So let's take an example of test login class. In our test login class, if I make it split it to right, in our test login class, we have 3 test cases, one here and 2 coming from the CSV source. And let's say in this case it's an Android emulator, but in the future when I will start, when I will add capabilities for real devices, let's say you only have 2 devices. And in that case, what you can do is you can limit the number of threads to 2. And let's say now if I run the test, you will see that, so let's say I'm trying to run all my tests. So within a class, I'm trying to run all my tests in parallel, and maybe for across classes, I will keep same thread. So what I should see is, instead of running all the 3 test cases in parallel, it should only trigger 2 test cases. Let's see if it works that way. So I'm trying to run the test, and we should see only 2 tests being triggered, which is exactly what you see now. So you don't see any test classes being triggered. You only see 2 tests. So you see a login user test, I think it's for instance 0, and you see the asset data warning is displayed, so these 2 tests. So the third one is not triggered, and which is exactly what we want. So you have gained some sort of control on how many threads you can run. Uh, Now what I do know is, uh, for example, in this case, it has created now 2 emulators, and what we ideally want is that if we have this situation, we only create the number of emulators same as the number of threads that we have provided. And what I realized is, at this moment I have not added that capability, and that is the reason you now see 3 devices on this machine. So for example, it triggered 2 tests, and now it has triggered a third emulator to run the test on the same test class. Now what I do know is, if I try to when this will go to the third class, it will reuse the same emulators, so it will not launch another emulator. And that was a use case I had in my mind before, but now considering this use case, where we would like to, let's say, not only fix the number of threads, but we would also like to fix the number of emulators. So you can see no new emulators are triggered. It still has it still is using the already existing 3 emulators to run the remaining 2 test cases. So I do see a feature that I have to add, but that's for another video. But at least you can already see that it is possible to limit the number of threads to whatever you want or whatever you need. And once I fix this thing, that If I give this fixed thread, then also create only this many devices, then maybe I'll make another video on that. But for now, I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you guys in another video. See you. Bye-bye.